Beep, you are here from Brazil tonight. And what is the situation now in Brazil in terms of GMO, and what is the protest movement against GMOs in Brazil doing? Is it growing?
Okay. From one hand, in fact, the growing area, the cultivated areas with GM soybean, GM corn, and GM cotton, in fact, is increasing as the area cultivated by these crops. But in the same time, the social movements and even within the scientific community, the movement against this type of production also is growing. And when we talk about exportation of grains, especially to Europe, we are passing with an interesting situation because the non-modified soybean, non-genetically modified soybean, non-genetically modified corn also are growing a lot. So the area cultivated with non-transgenic crops are growing a lot, and the exportation also is becoming increased process. So the European situation and the European interest to import non-GMO soybean and non-GM corn is making easier for the farmers, Brazilian farmers, to produce more and more non-GM soybean and non-GM corn.
And do you think that this is more important, that the European buyers are demanding non-GM soy, or is it also that the protest movement in Brazil is growing stronger?
I think that the economic and financial factor is more important, unfortunately, yeah, because the big farmers, they have to produce, and they can't produce non-GMOs if they have no body to buy it. So the European interest is a very important factor. But in fact, at the same time, the social movement and scientific movement also is growing. Principally when we began to talk about the negative impact of GMOs on health, on human health in particular. This approach was very important to make viable the progress of the social and for the scientific movement.
And finally, we heard something about that now genetically modified eucalyptus trees have been legalized in Brazil for commercial production. Do you know when these will be grown in Brazil and where?
Yeah. Unfortunately, in fact, the governmental agencies approve the production of eucalyptus, GMO eucalyptus. But as you know, the eucalyptus trees needs between 7 to 9 years to grow, and they didn't begin until now the cultivation of this genetically modified eucalyptus. But at the same time, also we have some movements trying to prevent the production of this type of tree due to the huge areas cultivated with eucalyptus. We understand that the environmental impact in this case would be very, very significant for the natural Brazilian ecosystems.
Okay, so there's still some reason for hope in this case.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Professor.
you.
You are here from Japan. Welcome. And we heard that recently there was a short ban or moratorium on GM wheat that was imported from the United States. It was normal wheat, but they found some contamination of GM wheat inside. Is this still going on now in Japan?
No, the problem was over, and we are very concerned about the contamination. But unfortunately, our government doesn't care about that, so the problem is over.
So, what are the GM topics that you are working on in Japan?
We are working on many issues in Japan because we have actually in Japan no GM crops cultivated, but the Japanese government does not prohibit to cultivate GM crops. So the GMO-free zone movement is very important for us. So we work on many issues about GMO, like GMO-free zone movement and GM canola contamination in Japan because we import many GM canola from Canada. It's a very big problem for us. And also we are working on an issue of GM food labeling because it's not good labeling system in Japan.
Do you have a label on animal products like meat or cheese when they have been fed on GM plants?
No, we request our government, but our government doesn't care about that. So we are working hard about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the interview. So you come from Benin in West Africa. Can you tell us a little bit, are there any GM plants growing there at the moment?
At this moment, we don't have really GM plant growing in Benin, but we have a neighboring country, which is Burkina Faso, where they are growing BT cotton. So we don't want GMO to be spread in West Africa. That's why we are really fighting. My organization is Jinukun. Jinukun means seed in the local language in Benin, because we want to fight for biodiversity. We want to preserve seed, local seed, farmer seed. And Jinukun belongs to a regional organization that we call the Coalition to Protect African Genetic Heritage. So in Benin, we succeeded to have two moratorium on GMOs. One in 2002 for 5 years, another one from 2008 to 2013. Now, at the end of the second moratorium, the government has not said anything, because when we are fearing that they will accept to introduce GMOs in Benin. That's why we are still fighting. Now we have, at the national level, we have what we call a coalition to a vigilance coalition on GMOs in the country, in Benin. And we come together. We have consumers organization, farmers organization, and other NGO working in the same sector. So all together, we are fighting so that our government does not introduce GMOs in the country. It is not easy, because we have scientists, we have some experts in the government who feel that we need GMOs, even in Africa, to solve the hunger problem.
And the companies are also putting a lot of pressure on the government, probably.
Probably on the government, because even on farmers' organization, we know that they usually call them in a meeting, putting them in a big hotel, paying them so that they can accept that GMO is good for the agriculture in Africa. But we don't believe that it is a solution. That's why we say that the GMOs, it is a solution which became problem for the farmers. That's why we are fighting.
And do normal people, normal consumers also talk about this and think about this, or is it not a big topic for them?
About 10 years ago, nobody knew about GMOs in Benin, particularly even in the university, they don't know. But due to our work, information, training, sensitization, now if you ask people in the street about GMO, you will at least find 2 or 3 people, how can I say that, 3 people on 10, they will tell you that they know about GMOs, because we really try to bring the information to the public as much as possible. And today, I think that in Benin, not a big part of the population, but some people, some part of the population, they know about GMOs.
And you will make sure that this part grows.
Yeah, of course. That is why we are now, we now change our approach. Instead of talking about GMO or against GMO, we now start talking about agroecology. Because if you want people positively to react in front of GMO, they should have their own agricultural practice. If they can keep it and grow without chemical fertilizer, pesticide, and GMOs, if they can live off that, so they will preserve their own their own mean of living. That's why we are working now on agroecology instead of talking much against GMOs.
Seems like a very sound strategy. Thank you very much,
hope.
Mr. Segbin. Thank you very much,
You're
and
welcome.
enjoy the
You're
conference.
welcome.
So you're here from Western India. Welcome. How is the situation there? In India, generally, there is a lot of GM cotton that is grown. What about your region?
In my region, I come from the region of Gujarat, which is an industrial area, but also has a lot of agriculture. The cotton in Gujarat is nearly 100% GMOs now. Maharashtra, of course. I come from an organization called Navdanya, and Navdanya has been saving seeds and fighting on the issues of seed sovereignty and food sovereignty for the last 25 years. And cotton, yes, almost 96 to 97% of the cotton in India is now GMOs. But now with the current government, which is looking very pro the GMOs, right now is approved 21 new varieties for trials, but in general is opening up more towards the corporations than the small farmers. So yeah, we have a bit of a fight ahead.
And do you also see some progress on organic cotton?
Yes, you do have a lot of organic cotton in India. India is, I think, one of the larger exporters of organic cotton. But we needn't look just as organic. We need to look, in India right now is under a severe agrarian crisis. We've had unseasonal rains last month, and more than 200 farmers have committed suicide just in the last month. One farmer last week committed suicide live on television. This is the state of the country right now. And the government is using this distress and this agrarian distress to take away land from the farmers, to tell farmers to get off the land and to build industry. So yes, organic farmer, but it's a much larger issue. It's about food sovereignty, food security. So GMOs, the conversation on GMOs also comes under the larger agricultural model that we are following, right? So
And there's also now, I think, the BT brinjal eggplant has also been approved.
That was one of the largest movements that happened against the BT eggplant that got defeated, thanks to the movements that rose against it, and Navdanya was a big part of that. The environment minister at that time went through a lot of public hearings, but the new government is wanting to reverse that trend. So with this, it'll be a nice challenge for those talking about security. Yes, we have a big challenge ahead. In fact, just when the government came in, when it was voted last year in May, the first thing it did is started targeting activists fighting against GMOs and against nuclear plants. So this government has a very clear motive here. So, yeah.
And at Navdanya, you are saving traditional seed varieties, providing them to the farmers to use them. How many farmers do you have as...
Navdanya's network of farmers is over 500,000 now that we have trained. Navdanya works from seed to table. So we save traditional varieties of seed. We have over 100 seed banks now in the country. We work with farmers, we train farmers in agroecological methods, and then we also take the produce to the market for them. So it works in the entire gamut. So on one side, fighting the regressive and the bad laws that are coming into the country, GMOs is a part of that, and also creating the alternatives. That's what Navdanya does.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Cummins, you come from the United States, the biggest GM producer in the world.
It is. I'm sorry to say that, but we also have a pretty big movement now of people who want to get rid of GMOs and industrial agriculture, and we're growing day by day.
We recently heard that now even some farmers who have been producing GM soybeans or corn are going back. Can you confirm this? Do you know some farmers who did that?
Yes, there's quite a few farmers in the Midwest who grow genetically engineered soybeans and corn who are noticing that you can get a lot more money for non-GMO or organic corn and soybeans, and they've noticed that there's a much bigger demand in the United States now for organic animal feed, organic corn and soybeans than there is for the chemical GMO stuff. So they're also seeing that there's the majority of farmers growing GMO crops are finding these super weeds, things like Palmer amaranth, are getting worse and worse, and they're having to mix, toxic herbicides along with Roundup's a toxic herbicide, but things like atrazine and so on that they claimed were being replaced. And now actually we're seeing there's about a doubling of herbicide use in the United States in the last 6 years because GMOs don't work anymore, and the farmers see this. They also see that the animals aren't as healthy as they used to be. They see that the waterways around their farms are more polluted because they're using more chemical fertilizers. There's more herbicide runoff. You even have the city of Des Moines, Iowa, right in the middle of GMO corn and soybeans, suing 3 counties north of Des Moines because the water supply is getting so contaminated in Des Moines from the runoff from these fields that they can't treat it, anymore without spending a fortune. So yeah, GMOs are, I believe, have hit their peak, and it's going to start to go down. But of course, what we need to realize is that there weren't any GMOs back in 1994. I mean, did we have a good food and farming system back in 1994 that was, produced healthy people, healthy animals, healthy soil, a stable climate? Well, no, we didn't. And if we got rid of GMOs tomorrow, we're still on a breakneck speed over the cliff. We've got to deal with the entire aspect of factory farming and industrial agriculture, which, among other things, is the number one cause of global warming. I mean, people don't understand that 11 to 15% of all greenhouse gases come from the fossil fuels used on the farm or used to make chemical fertilizers or used to make pesticides, to dry the grain and so on and so forth. They don't realize that 11 to 18% of all the greenhouse gases that come from deforestation or draining of wetlands are a direct result of agriculture. They don't understand that highly processed food that is shipped over long distances, that's another 15 to 20%, and that wasted food and food that's thrown into landfills instead of composted is another 2 to 4%. So you add all that up, the greenhouse crisis is caused by our out-of-control system of food and farming. And if we don't address this, we could stop using fossil fuels tomorrow, but we still have too much CO2 in the atmosphere. The only way we're going to get that CO2 out of the atmosphere and put it back in the ground where it used to be, is through not only organic but regenerative farming that restores the soil, exponentially increases photosynthesis. We got to replant those trees. We got to make some changes and make them quick. Yeah, let's start with GMOs, but let's look at the whole picture.
And you are trying to change this, and you also told us that you have a project in Mexico. Can you explain something about this? What are you doing there?
Yes, in Mexico there's a growing movement of consumers and farmers to fight against GMOs. In Mexico, we've successfully gotten federal courts to rule that GMO corn and GMO soybeans cannot be planted. There's an increasing awareness that we've got to change the whole food and farming system. So we have an affiliate in Mexico called Via Organica, the Organic Way. And our belief is that the Canada, Mexico, the U.S., I mean, we're all in one economic unit now, so we better work together. And that's starting to happen more and more.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Mr. Cummins. You are from New Caledonia, the French island, and you work for Stop OGM Pacific. Can you tell us, do you have any GM plants on your island?
Yeah, we're afraid we are very scared with GM papaya. And the big problem in Pacific Islands, there is no GM regulation. There is 22 independent countries, for example, Fiji, Vanuatu, Solomon, Samoa, and no GM regulation. There is also a free French territory in Pacific, New Caledonia, Wallis and Futuna, and French Polynesia. It's French territory, but GM European or French GM regulation are not applied, and there is massive importation of seeds. And in New Caledonia, we obtained GM regulation last year, but just for seeds. We have at the moment no labeling, and in the two other French territory, Wallis and Futuna and French Polynesia, there is no GM regulation.
So you are very much standing on your own, and the French government, that is usually very strict on GMOs in France, is not helping you.
Little bit, but New Caledonia and the two other French territory are part autonomous, and is half independent, half French, and part of regulation are applied, but not all, and justice, security, but economy are applied, but not for GM regulation.
So a lot of farmers are concerned by this and are fighting against GMOs on your island?
Now, yeah, after 5 years of working, now, yes, but before, it's very surprising, but before we start, no knowledge about GMO. When you visit different Pacific Island countries, you talk about GMO, they don't know what is it. You explain it's a seed, and they make confusion with hybrids and GM, and they don't know a lot. And the big problem, they import a lot of seeds from everywhere in the world. And seeds are GM or not, nobody knows. And there is no visibility at the moment in Pacific Island country. And one of our mission is to make a database. For example, if you search on internet, Google, I don't know, GMO Fiji, you find nothing. It's empty. Nobody knows. Politics don't know, and the big problem is Pacific. There is Hawaii Island, and Hawaii is the big GM laboratory of the world. More than 6,000 GM varieties was created. They produce GM seed from all over the world, and they export fruits and seeds. And the big problem we have in Pacific is papaya. And we are very sad and worried with Hawaiian GM papaya. We are quite sure now the Hawaiian GM papaya are grown everywhere in Pacific Island and in Asia. And,
do you have the possibility or the technical means to test the papayas for?
Yeah, but it's very expensive. We send analysis in Europe. It's about 100 euro per test, and but we'll find solution. Maybe there is quick test very easily for $10. We have to find them, and soon. But we give a lot of information, and it's the first time we came here for GM-free Europe, because we are a part of Europe without application of regulation, but it's a French territory, and we have to uniting the GM resistance in the world. For example, European people can help us about the papaya because in Europe, I'm French. I was born in France. I lived 20 years in France. I know Europe very well. But we drink tropical juice. And there is papaya juice. Maybe Europe import. I'd like to clarify with the other organization, but maybe they import concentrate papaya juice from where? And is it GM or not? And we are quite sure it's GM, but about the European labeling, it's not perfect. And with good collaboration, together we can fight against GM papaya. It's time now. And another point very important in Pacific Islands, 80% of population practice traditional agriculture. It's more organic than organic certified. It's normally without inputs. And 80% it's a lot. And the big problem there, it's traditional agriculture is not a business to make money, to sell, it's just to feed family. And normally they use traditional seeds, but since a few decades they start to use hybrids because it's more easily, they don't realize and they lose the seed autonomy. And that start with hybrids a few decades and now that's continue with GM. And it's important to protect traditional farmers.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Guerin.
With pleasure.